I'm giving a speech on mental illness. Those last two speeches were great, by the way. So, I have Asperger's. I learned about it first a while back, maybe 6 years ago, because when I was young, I used to get really angry and I would pick knives from my mom's cutlery set and I would threaten people with them. As you might imagine, that sort of behavior really didn't go over that well, so they sent me to therapy. And after a while, they realized that there was something a bit off with me. And after more while, they realized that I have Asperger's. Now, there's the definition. Asperger's is a type of autism, and it has some fun side effects. It's not as high up, I guess, on the autism scale as other types of autism, which means that I'm more easily capable to communicate than other people with autism, and I've had a lot of luck and privilege and therapy, so now I can come up here and communicate with you guys. But there are a lot of people who haven't had that, and this speech is in a sense dedicated to them. Now, I don't always try to describe myself as autistic, because I think that a lot of people have perceptions about that label that don't really describe me. Like I said, people think that just because you're autistic that means that you can't communicate well, but I think I can communicate decently, although it's too early in the speech to determine that. Another thing that autistic people have problems with is like sarcasm and humor, but I feel like I can grasp that fairly well. So like I said, it's not a perfect label, but it is useful at times. When I was first diagnosed, my mom got a bunch of books on autism and autistic children, and one in particular was like a Bible to me. It explained a lot about me. It explained why I constantly want to plan things out, and when things deviate from those plans, I just really dislike it. It explained why I constantly play devil's advocate. It explained why I have problems keeping eye contact with people. And it explained why I have trouble sometimes with emotions and have these muted emotional responses. It also explained something called hypotonia, which is why I ended up having to go to physical therapy, because it's not just a mental thing. Like, it messes with your whole body. And now, talking about that emotional thing, it's very odd to explain to some people, but basically muted emotional responses is like, you don't feel as much as other people on occasion. For example, I have depression, so my scale of sadness essentially goes from, that happened, to the world is terrible and I feel broken and everything sucks. And I first noticed this a few years back when the Newtown incident happened. For those of you who can't remember, it was a terrible incident where a school shooter came into the Sandy Hook Elementary School and shot 20 people. I should have a slide on this. They shot 20 children and 6 staff members. And we were all on the bus going home from school when this happened. And when the news came, a bunch of people were sad and they were crying, which is the right response. But all I could feel was sort of, that sucks. But I didn't feel anything more. And I felt terrible about that. Like, you should feel bad about that. But I couldn't. And that was the first time I realized that this is something that's going to mess with me for the rest of my life, emotionally. Now, let's see. As I learned more about being autistic, I didn't necessarily want people to know I was autistic. I hid it and I hid it and I hid it for like 4 years until I got to high school. And then I started getting friends that I could trust. And I told them I was autistic. And because of that luck and privilege and therapy, most of them hadn't even picked up on it. But even after getting that good reaction, I didn't really want to tell more people because there's a lot of stigma that go along with it that isn't really great. Going back to the example of Newtown, Adam Lanza, the shooter, had autism. Not only did he have autism, he had the exact same type of autism that I have, Asperger's. And you would see, especially around that time, a bunch of articles would come out about people who had Asperger's or had autism just in general and who would do these terrible things. And it got to a point where I was afraid that that was something that was just going to happen to autistic people in general. And a lot of people just had these misconceptions, and they thought that I was all of these things. And I didn't want to be these things, and it was just scary as hell to me. But it's important to note that those things that they thought aren't true. it's a myth that autism makes you more prone to violence. The violence I displayed at the beginning of the story has nothing to do with me being autistic and just had to do with me being just like a terrible, insufferable little child. And the problem is, though, that because of all that happening, the seed of fear and hatred was planted in the public consciousness. And so now I'm still afraid to tell people. And actually, like a month back, someone actually told me, like, hey, Enrique, you seem like the type of person who would shoot up the school, which is a weird joke to tell. And they didn't know that I was autistic, but when they said that, it hit me really weirdly, because I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, no, I really hope that never happened. I really hope that never happens. I really hope I never do that. But it was just tapping back into that thing that had happened before where I was afraid of it. And I don't think I would. Like, I'm a lover, not a fighter. But it's scary. It really is. Now, I should mention how it's really odd how so many people have so many misconceptions about autism, and yet and mental illness in general, and feel okay with talking about it so freely despite knowing so little. I was in an argument with someone who used to be my friend a while back, and at one point in the argument they said, "You're being so autistic right now." And they didn't know that I had autism. That was just them calling me autistic for no reason. And it's just, we just used it as an insult without them knowing exactly what it meant. And when it happened, my first reaction was I wanted to tell them I actually was autistic because I thought that'd be pretty funny in the moment. But I didn't because, like I said, I was scared. And people just say things without really being particularly informed, even to the point where they'll use it as an insult without knowing how to use it as an effective insult. Now, I come from the Anthony Jeselnik School of Comedy. Anthony Jeselnik is a dark comedian who basically goes on the assumption that people who say that nothing's funny about blank are idiots. And I agree with that. I think anyone who's particularly smart about a topic can make it funny no matter how terrible it is. So I don't want to see violence against autistic people. I don't want to see people being just rude to them or people with mental illness. But I also don't want to stop anyone's freedom of speech or pretend that no one's ever written a good autistic joke. But I do think it's important that people treat those jokes the same way that you would treat a racist joke or something. Where if it's bad, you say, no, this is not good. You're doing this and it's lazy humor. You haven't put thought into this. But there's just a lot of negativity about people who have mental handicaps. That's where a lot of that lazy humor comes from. I understand people have a fear of the other. That's where a lot of this hatred comes from. But still, people will get violent or aggressive towards people with mental illness for no reason. A while back, me and a friend and some other people were tubing down river. And me and this friend were tubing down river, and about 10 yards back there was another kid who was with the organization with us. And he had mental illness. He had, I believe it was autism, a more severe form than I did. And he was just doing his own thing. He was talking to himself. He wasn't hurting anybody. And then these two jocks came up. One of them was kayaking, the other one was in a tube getting pulled by the kayak. And they started making fun of him. Like I said, he wasn't doing anything to them. They just made fun of him because they're like, why not? And it was just really rude. He didn't do anything. And me and my friend, we were like, stop that. And then they started to yell at us, and that whole thing ended with me saying something I'm not allowed to say up on here. But it was just weird, because again, they did nothing. They did nothing wrong. I understand the root of bigotry. The root of bigotry is people wanting to have a scapegoat, wanting to have someone who they feel superior than, that they could never become. But even knowing that is to stop. Why would you do that? And you see this a lot. A lot of people who have mental illness get bullied for no reason. Oh wait, that was supposed to illustrate the river thing. But now we're past that, so that messed that up one. But for example, you can see things with cyberbullying going on. There was just recently, there was this headline where these high school football players tricked and raped this black mentally ill kid and just did these terrible things to him. Even 50 Cent decided to just randomly insult this autistic guy recently, and honestly, I can't really expect much more from a guy who wrote lyrics like, I'm stupid rich, got retarded money, I'm special ed, I got special bread. really showing your prowess and control over the English language there, 50. But still, like, it's crazy how much there is, how much bullying there is. I do fear, though, that there will be an overcorrection by people who are politically correct to say nothing is wrong with you. That's stupid. I'm autistic. I have a mental illness. Something's wrong with me. If there wasn't, I wouldn't be diagnosed. If you saw someone who had just had their leg cut off, you wouldn't be like, everything's fine. You're going to fit in with everyone else. You're going to have such a great time walking like everyone normally. No, that's not what you do. The leg's off. It's gone. You have to acknowledge that. So instead of pretending like everything's fine, do something that's actually useful. Because we're not stupid. We know that there's something that's wrong. So instead of trying to act like there's nothing wrong, help. Now, I really do hope that people get a better sense of people with mental illness from this talk. Like I said, I've had a lot of luck and privilege and opportunities that a lot of people aren't going to be able to have. And maybe if they had it, they'd be able to come up here and tell their own stories even better than I can. But unfortunately, a lot of them can't. And people just assume that people with mental illnesses can't do a lot of things that we can do. A mental illness, while it does have holistic elements, it doesn't necessarily affect every single thing a person does. A lot of people with mental illness can do things pretty normally, except with one specific area that's been affected by that mental illness. We really aren't that different from you. And it would mean a lot if people invested in mental illness, because it really is that. It's an investment, because we get so much back from it. Outside of the idea that a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members, it just makes monetary sense. Like, for example, this nation loses about $193.2 billion with a B dollars every year due to mental illness-related things. And that's in money that we could have collected, not in money that we're spending, in money that we're losing. 24% of state prisoners and 26% of homeless adults living in shelters have mental illness. And if we could help them, if we could make them into healthy members of society, which they can be, into taxpayers, we could change that dynamic. So I really hope that all of you get a sense of nuance about people with mental illness from the speech, that you are able to understand this in a more full light. People like me, Enrique Eguiguren, because we really aren't that different from you. In the end, you're probably going to end up knowing someone like me, and if you don't, you probably will. So I just want you to know that when you're interacting with people like me, you should take, not pity, but have understanding to an extent, and realize that we all just want to fit in.